What happens when your life implodes in front of the world? Eliza Sterling, divorced, forgotten, and humiliated by her billionaire ex-husband on the biggest red carpet of the year. In front of flashing cameras, his new wife drenched her in red wine, and he told her she didn't belong. But they forgot one thing. They forgot who her father was. In the next 30 seconds, a single speech wouldn't just change the spotlight, it would change the entire power structure of New York City. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how a single night of ultimate shame became the beginning of the most ruthless revenge. Eliza Sterling zipped the black body bag closed, the finality of the sound echoing in the cavernous silence of her Tribeca art studio. Inside the bag wasn't a person, but a canvas, a portrait of a woman dissolving into a vortex of swirling, chaotic colors. She called it the erasure. It was, she admitted, a bit on the nose. For the past 18 months, since the ink had dried on the most talked-about divorce in New York financial circles, Eliza had felt herself being erased. She had gone from Mrs. Damian Vance, wife of the tech wunderkind billionaire, to just Eliza. In the ruthless taxonomy of Manhattan society, she was a footnote. Damian Vance, her ex-husband, had seen to that. Their marriage had been a 10-year masterclass in diminishing returns. He had loved her ambition when they were young, when Vance Tech was just a dream sketched on a napkin in a Harvard dorm. She, with her quiet, terrifyingly sharp mind, and a double major in art history and business administration from Wharton, had helped him build the scaffolding of his empire. Then the empire grew, and she did not. Or rather, he preferred her to shrink. "Eliza, darling," he'd say, his voice a smooth baritone that charmed boardrooms and investors. "Why stress over spreadsheets? You have such a wonderful eye for art. Go decorate. Go paint." So she did. She had painted and decorated and hosted his dinners and smiled at his investors, all while he slowly, methodically, chiseled away at her confidence, her connections, and finally, her identity. When he'd announced he was leaving her for Isabella Rossi, a 22-year-old influencer whose entire brand was aspirational wealth, the divorce settlement was swift and brutal. He called it generous. She called it hush money. It was just enough to be comfortable, but not enough to ever be a threat. Tonight was the Vanguard Legacy Gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was the absolute pinnacle of the social calendar, a night where old money, like her family, and new tech, like Damian, collided. Eliza hadn't been invited for years, not since Damian had taken control of their social lives. But this year, her old friend, Chloe Beaumont, who now sat on the museum's acquisitions board, had procured her a single ticket. "It's time, Elle," Chloe had insisted over the phone. "You're a brilliant artist. People are starting to notice your work. But you can't stay hidden in that studio forever. You need to be seen." Eliza looked at the dress hanging on her studio mannequin. It wasn't a Chanel or a Dior or any of the labels Damian had once insisted she wear. It was her own creation. A column of pure, white, sculptural silk, hand-painted with a delicate silver leaf motif of a phoenix's wing. It was her art. It was her one chance to reintroduce herself to the world, not as Damian Vance's discarded wife, but as Eliza Sterling, artist. A vibration rattled her workbench, a text from a number she still hadn't deleted. Her father's assistant. "Mr. Sterling's car is 3 blocks from your location. He requests you meet him in the lobby." Eliza's blood ran cold. Here? Now. Arthur Sterling. The name landed like a block of granite. If Damian Vance was a river of new, fast-moving money, Arthur Sterling was the entire mountain range from which it flowed. He was the reclusive, iron-willed patriarch of Sterling Enterprises, a multi-generational, $80 billion conglomerate that dealt in everything from global shipping to rare minerals. He was also the man who hadn't spoken more than 10 words to her since her wedding day. "He's a parasite, Eliza," Arthur had said, his voice cold and flat in his Fifth Avenue study the day she'd announced her engagement. "This Vance boy, he's a taker. He will drain you, and when you are empty, he will discard you." "You don't know him, Father. We're building something," she had cried. "No," Arthur had said, turning back to the stock ticker on his screen. "He is building something. You are his first acquisition." He had been right, and the shame of that, the burning, bitter shame of his accuracy, had been a chasm between them ever in. She grabbed her clutch, her hands shaking. Why tonight? Why, after all this time, was he here? She walked to the freight elevator, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. The white dress felt less like a statement and more like a shroud. She was terrified. Not of the gala, not of Damien, but of the cold, disappointed gaze of the one man whose approval she had always craved and never, ever received. The air outside the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a kinetic storm of flashing white lights and shouted names. The roar of the crowd pressed against the velvet ropes was a physical force. Eliza stepped out of her father's obsidian-black Rolls-Royce. He had, of course, not come, sending the car as a silent, loaded gesture, and immediately felt her lungs tighten. She had forgotten what this felt like. The sheer, overwhelming scale of the event. Hundreds of photographers, packed 20 deep, bellowed for the A-listers. "Gigi! Kendall! Mr. Chalamet! Over here!" Eliza Sterling, in her beautiful but labelless white dress, was invisible. She was a ghost walking among gods. She took a breath, clutched her silver bag, and stepped onto the crimson carpet. The first few reporters she passed barely glanced at her. Their eyes were scanning over her shoulder for the next big arrival. She heard one mutter to another. "Who is that?" "PR." Then, a familiar, saccharine voice cut through the din. "Eliza? Eliza Vance? Oh, wait. It's Sterling now, isn't it?" Eliza froze. Veronica Finch, the most venomous gossip columnist for the New York Post, was standing right in front of her, microphone extended like a dagger. "Hello, Veronica," Eliza said, forcing a tight smile. "We haven't seen you in an age, darling," Veronica purred, her eyes raking over Eliza's dress. "How brave to wear your own design. Tell me, what's it like being back? It must be so hard, seeing the old crowd." "It's a wonderful night for the museum," Eliza replied, her voice flatter than she'd intended. Yes, of course." Veronica's smile was all teeth. "And speaking of the old crowd..." A fresh wave of flashes erupted at the end of the carpet. A black and silver Bugatti had pulled up. The crowd surged. Damien Vance emerged, looking impossibly handsome in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. He turned and offered his hand. Out stepped Isabella Rossi. She was a vision of intentional excess, poured into a glittering, near-naked gown by Balmain that left nothing to the imagination. She was 22, flawless, and she radiated the kind of blinding confidence that only comes from knowing you are the most looked-at person in the room. They were the couple. The photographers went insane. "Damien! Isabella! The power couple!" Eliza tried to move past, to slip into the museum unnoticed, but Veronica Finch deftly stepped, blocking her path. "Oh, but you must say hello." It was too late. Damien had seen her. His perfect, media-trained smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by something cold and appraising. He guided Isabella toward her, a predator sensing an opportunity. "Eliza," he said, his voice loud enough for the reporters nearby to hear, "I'm surprised to see you here. I didn't think this was your scene anymore." "Hello, Damien." "Isabella." Eliza nodded, her insides turning to ice. Isabella giggled, a high, tinkling sound. She stepped forward, her arms wide, as if to hug her. "Eliza, sweetie. Oh my God, I love your dress. It's so quaint. Did you make it yourself?" And then it happened. It was so fast, so perfectly executed, it could have been choreography. Isabella tripped on the hem of her own gown. Her hand, which was holding a full flute of deep, ruby-red champagne, a prop surely for the cameras, flew forward. The entire glass of red wine arced through the air and emptied itself down the front of Eliza's pristine, white, silk-painted dress. A collective, horrified gasp sucked the air from the carpet. The red wine bled into the white silk, obliterating the delicate phoenix wing. It looked like a wound, a fatal, gushing wound. Isabella brought her hands to her mouth. "Oh my God, Eliza, I am so sorry." Her eyes, however, were dancing with unconcealed, vicious glee. Eliza just stood there, frozen. The world narrowed to the dark, spreading stain and the sound of 1,000 cameras clicking, capturing the single worst moment of her life. Click, 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 flash, click. Veronica Finch's microphone was practically in her mouth. "Eliza, your reaction. How do you feel?" Eliza couldn't speak. She was drowning. Damien Vance stepped forward. He placed a proprietary hand on Isabella's back, pulling her away from the mess. He looked at Eliza, at the ruined dress, at her pale, trembling face. He leaned in, his voice a low, confidential whisper that was just loud enough for the surrounding boom mics to catch. "Some things never change, Eliza," he said, his tone one of mock pity. "You're always in over your head. You try so hard, but you simply don't belong here." He shook his head, gave a small, sad sigh for the cameras, and then steered his new, perfect wife past her. "Come on, darling. Let's not let this spill ruin our night." They swept past her and up the grand staircase, leaving Eliza alone, soaked, and utterly, completely humiliated. The grand marble-floored ladies' lounge of the Metropolitan Museum was a sanctuary of hushed tones and old-world elegance. Tonight, it was the scene of Eliza's collapse. She burst through the heavy oak doors, past a startled attendant, and into the farthest stall, where she finally, violently, retched into the toilet. The shock and shame had hit her stomach like a physical blow. She sank to the cool, tiled floor, her back against the stall wall, and the tears came. They weren't silent, graceful tears. They were the ugly, choking sobs of someone who had just had their last scrap of hope publicly incinerated. Her dress was ruined. Her painting was ruined. The one piece of herself she had dared to show the world was now a grotesque mockery, stained and sticky. "You simply don't belong here." Damien's voice echoed in her head, twisting around the memory of her father's. "He's a taker. He will drain you." They were right. She was a fool to think she could re-enter this world. A fool to think a dress could change who she was, the discarded wife, the failed daughter, the invisible woman. She heard the door to the lounge open. "Eliza! Elle! Are you in here?" It was Chloe Beaumont. Chloe rushed into the stall, her face a mask of horror. "Oh, honey, I saw. She knelt, pulling a handful of paper towels and dabbing uselessly at the massive dark stain. That child. And Damien, I could kill him. "It's ruined," Eliza whispered, her voice raw. "She ruined it." "Forget the dress," Chloe said, her voice fierce. "It's what they did to you. They did that on purpose, Elle. That was a performance. That was an execution. I have to leave, Eliza said, trying to stand, but her legs were shaking. I can't go back out there. Everyone saw. No, Chloe said, grabbing her arm. You can't. If you leave now, they win. That's what they want. They want you to run home, crawl back into your studio, and disappear. That's the story Veronica Finch will write tomorrow. Eliza Sterling, soaked and shamed, flees gala. So what? Eliza cried, the tears flowing again. It's true, look at me, I'm a mess. I don't belong here. She had used his exact words. The realization hit her, and the tears of shame turned to a cold, simmering rage. He didn't get to write her ending. He didn't get to define her. Eliza stood up, her spine stiffening. She looked at herself in the grand, gilded mirror. The woman looking back was a disaster. Her makeup was streaked, her hair was coming loose, and her dress, her beautiful, hopeful dress, was a symbol of her humiliation. She took a deep, shuddering breath. No, you're right. She turned to Chloe. Give me your jacket. What? Chloe was wearing a chic, black, velvet Saint Laurent blazer. Your jacket. Give it to me, now. Confused, Chloe slipped it off. Eliza pulled off her own ruined, silk-painted jacket, leaving her in just the column dress. The stain was, if anything, even more prominent. It was a brutal slash of red against the white. Then she put on Chloe's blazer. It was slightly too big, but it was sharp. She buttoned it once, high on her waist. The effect was startling. The stain was still visible, peeking out above and below the blazer. It wasn't hidden. It was framed. She looked like a warrior. She looked like someone who had just walked through fire and hadn't bothered to wipe off the soot. Elle, you're still stained, Chloe said gently. I know, Eliza said, her voice dropping to a low, steady frequency Chloe had never heard before. Let them look. She pushed her hair back, wiped the tears from under her eyes with an angry smudge, and grabbed her clutch. Where are you going? Inside, Eliza said. I paid for my ticket. I'm going to see the art. She walked out of the lounge, head held high, and re-entered the great hall. The murmur of the cocktail hour ceased as she passed. People stared. They pointed. They whispered. Eliza Sterling, in her stained dress and borrowed blazer, didn't look at a single one of them. She walked straight past the receiving line, past the tables of champagne, and into the main ballroom, just as the evening's dinner and presentations were about to begin. The ballroom was a masterpiece of opulence. Massive bouquets of white orchids dripped from the ceiling, and the tables were set for 1,000 of the world's most powerful people. The collective net worth in the room could have solved world hunger. Eliza found her assigned table. It was, predictably, near the back, by the kitchens. Table 94. She was seated with junior donors and the plus ones of people who mattered. Across the vast room, at table 1, sat Damien and Isabella. They were holding court, laughing as Isabella theatrically reenacted her tumble. Damien caught Eliza's eye from across the room. He raised his glass in a mock toast, his smile a perfect blend of pity and contempt. Eliza turned away, her stomach clenching, and focused on the stage. The director of the museum was speaking, thanking the donors, the artists, and the patrons. "Whoa, and now," the director said, his voice resonating with importance, "it is my distinct honor to introduce our guest of honor. This is a man who needs no introduction, for his family's legacy is woven into the very fabric of this city, this nation, and indeed, the global economy. He is a titan of industry, a visionary philanthropist, and, I am proud to say, a pivotal supporter of this museum. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Arthur Sterling." The room erupted in applause. Eliza's heart stopped. She hadn't just seen his car, he was here. The guest of honor. A spotlight cut through the darkness and found a tall, imposing man in his late 70s, standing from a discreet table near the side of the stage. Arthur Sterling was not like Damien. Damien was a peacock, all bright plumage and noise. Arthur was an eagle. His hair was silver, his suit was a dark, impeccably tailored Savile Row creation that was probably older than Isabella, and his eyes were pale, calculating, and missed nothing. He walked to the podium and adjusted the microphone. The room fell into a heavy, expectant silence. This was a man who never gave public speeches. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze sweeping the room. Eliza, at table 94, felt the weight of it, even from a distance. Then his eyes found her. There was no flicker of recognition, no warmth, no anger. His gaze simply landed on her. He saw the stained dress. He saw the borrowed blazer. He saw her sitting alone at the worst table in the room. His eyes then moved, slowly, deliberately, across the ballroom to table 1. He watched Damien laugh and place a kiss on Isabella's bare shoulder. He held his gaze on them for a full 5 seconds. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melt in the water glasses. Damien, sensing the shift in the room's energy, looked up. He saw Arthur Sterling staring at him. Damien's smile tightened. He gave a respectful, almost obsequious, nod. Arthur Sterling did not nod back. He turned his attention to the polished wooden podium. He had a set of note cards, a prepared speech. He touched them, his long, aristocratic fingers resting on the edge. Then, with a slight, almost imperceptible movement, he pushed the cards to the side. He gripped the edges of the podium, his knuckles white. He looked back out, not at the crowd, not at Damien, but directly, unequivocally, at his daughter. "Good evening," he said. His voice was a low gravel, amplified by the microphone, and it sent a chill down Eliza's spine. He was going off script. "I am told tonight's theme is legacy," Arthur Sterling began, his voice commanding absolute attention. "A fitting theme for a museum which houses the legacies of artists long since past. We in this room are obsessed with the concept." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "We build legacies of steel, legacies of code, legacies of capital. We acquire companies. We disrupt markets. We build skyscrapers that scrape the very heavens, all in an effort to leave a mark, to prove that we were here." His eyes were fixed on Eliza. She felt pinned to her chair, a butterfly under glass. "But we often mistake value for volume," he continued. "We mistake noise for substance. We celebrate the disruptors, the takers, the ones who burn down the old to make way for their new, shiny, and often hollow creations." At table 1, Damien Vance's smile had vanished. He was sitting bolt upright, his champagne glass untouched. He knew, as did everyone in the room, that he was the quintessential disruptor. "I have spent my life building an empire," Arthur said, his voice dropping slightly. "Sterling Enterprises. My father built it. His father built it. It is an empire of substance, of things you can touch, ships, steel, energy, things that last. And for 30 years the world has asked, who comes next? Who will carry this legacy?" The camera feeds that had been projecting the stage onto massive screens at the side of the room suddenly panned, as if directed by an unseen hand to find Damien and Isabella. Then they panned to the back of the room, finding Eliza, her stained dress and defiant posture thrown into sharp relief for all to see. "Tonight," Arthur said, his voice ringing with sudden cold anger, "I watched the new world interact with the old, and I was unimpressed. A collective gasp. This was not a speech. This was a reckoning. I watched a display of profound disrespect, a display of hollow vanity and calculated cruelty. Isabella Rossi's face had gone sheet white beneath her expensive tan. Damien looked apoplectic, his jaw working silently. He was trapped. To stand up, to protest, would be to admit the accusation. He could only sit and take it. And I realized, Arthur continued, that the leader my company needs is not someone who craves the spotlight. The leader I need is not someone who builds their worth by diminishing the worth of others. The leader for Sterling Enterprises, he said, his voice rising to a crescendo, must be someone who has been diminished and has refused to break. Someone who has been told they do not belong, and yet is still here. He raised his hand and pointed. Not a subtle gesture. A direct, unmissable accusatory point. But he wasn't pointing at Damien. He was pointing directly at table 94, directly at Eliza. I have been testing my children, my heirs. I have been watching, waiting to see who had the fortitude, the resilience, the character to lead. I see now I have only one. The entire room turned, a wave of 1,000 horrified, ecstatic, and bewildered faces, all staring at the woman in the stained dress. Eliza had stopped breathing. This was not happening. This was a dream. This was a nightmare. I am here tonight, Arthur Sterling declared, his voice a gavel strike of finality, to announce my immediate retirement as CEO of Sterling Enterprises. And I am here to name my successor, the new Chief Executive Officer and the sole heir to the entire Sterling fortune and its controlling shares, is my daughter. He paused, letting the name hang in the air for one perfect, brutal second. Ms. Eliza Sterling. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the Metropolitan Museum of Art was the thwack, thwack, thwack of a single waiter dropping a tray of glasses by the kitchen door. Then, chaos. It was not applause. It was a roar, a cacophony of scraping chairs, of shouted questions, of 1,000 urgent, whispered conversations erupting at once. Did he say Eliza? His daughter? Sole heir? What about Julian? Referring to Eliza's reckless, party boy brother. The spotlights, which had been respectfully trained on Arthur Sterling, now swung wildly, hunting for their new target. They found her, at table 94, blinding her. On the massive screens, her pale, utterly shocked face was magnified 100 times, and the cameras, the photographers who had been relegated to the back of the room, burst past security. They stampeded between tables, a wave of flashing bulbs, all surging toward her. Eliza! Eliza! Ms. Sterling! Veronica Finch was at the front of the pack, her face a mask of predatory ecstasy. This was the story of the decade. Ms. Sterling, what do you say to your father? Ms. Sterling, how does it feel? Eliza couldn't speak. She was paralyzed, but the most profound reaction was not at table 94. It was at table 1. Isabella Rossi was staring, her mouth open, her influencer mask completely shattered. She looked like a child who had just been told that Christmas and her birthday were cancelled. Damien, she whispered. What did he say? Damien Vance was no longer pale. He was a mottled, dangerous shade of purple. His hands were clenched so tightly on the table, his wine glass shattered in his grip. He didn't seem to notice the blood welling in his palm. He was staring at Eliza, but he wasn't seeing the woman he'd humiliated. He was seeing the $80 billion dollars. He was seeing the conglomerate that dwarfed his own company. He was seeing the woman who, 30 seconds ago, was nothing, and who now held the power to annihilate him. Vance Tech had 2 major pending contracts with Sterling Shipping, a deal he had been leveraging his old, tenuous family connection to try and close. Without those contracts, his entire next quarter's projections evaporated. His shock curdled into a desperate reptilian calculation. He was already planning his next move. On stage, Arthur Sterling didn't wait for the applause. He stepped down from the podium and began to walk, with that same unhurried, implacable pace, through the sea of stunned guests. The crowd parted for him, as if he were a biblical prophet. He walked past table 1. He did not glance at Damien. He walked all the way to the back of the room, to table 94, and stopped in front of his daughter. The cameras were blinding. The noise was deafening. Eliza looked up at the father she hadn't truly spoken to in a decade. His face was unreadable, but his eyes— there was something in his eyes. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was assessment. He did not hug her. He did not smile. Arthur Sterling was not a man for sentimental gestures. He simply extended a hand. "Eliza," he said, his voice quiet but carrying over the din. She looked at his hand. This was it. The moment. The choice. To stay the victim or to become something else. Her hand, shaking, rose and took his. His grip was like iron. He pulled her gently to her feet. The cameras went into a frenzy. "We have work to do," Arthur said, his voice for her ears only. "My car is waiting." He placed a hand on the small of her back, shielding her from the press, and began to guide her out of the ballroom. She was walking. She wasn't running. She was departing. As they reached the grand archway, Eliza paused. She turned just once and looked back. Her eyes found Damien's. He was standing now, his bloody hand forgotten. His face was a contortion of raw, undiluted panic. He looked small. He looked desperate. Eliza Sterling held his gaze. She said nothing. She didn't have to. Then she turned her back on him and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the stained dress, the broken glass, and the life she once knew behind her forever. The next morning, at 7 a.m. sharp, the 80th floor boardroom of the Sterling Enterprises Tower was already full. The view was commanding, overlooking Central Park, but the mood was frigid. The dozen board members, grizzled, grey-suited men and one formidable woman, Eleanor Davies, nursed their coffees and stared at the empty chair at the head of the table. They looked, Eliza thought, like a tribunal of angry owls. Eliza had slept for exactly 0 minutes. Her father's driver had taken her to his penthouse, a place she hadn't seen in 10 years, where a tailor and a lawyer were waiting. By 3 a.m., she had been fitted for an entirely new wardrobe and had signed a mountain of documents. Now she stood outside the boardroom, dressed not in silk or canvas, but in a bespoke, graphite-grey Armani power suit. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. The only trace of the artist was the small, phoenix wing pin on her lapel. "They're skeptical," Arthur said, standing beside her. He too was in his uniform, a dark blue suit. They see an art school hobbyist. They see the messy divorce. They see Julian. Ah, Julian, her younger brother, the intended heir. Julian Sterling was famous for 3 things: crashing a McLaren into a Monaco casino, dating a string of European starlets, and a crippling gambling addiction. "They think this is an emotional, rash decision from a senile old man," Arthur said flatly. "They're preparing to challenge your appointment, to vote no confidence." "Why did you do it, Father?" Eliza asked, her voice quiet. "Was it pity? Because of what Damien did?" Arthur Sterling let out a dry, rasping sound that might have been a laugh. "Pity? Eliza, I don't trade an $80 billion company for pity. That stunt at the gala, that was merely the catalyst. It was the final piece of data." "Data? I haven't been ignoring you, Eliza. I've been watching you." He tapped his temple. "For 18 months, I've had a team tracking your every move." Eliza felt a chill, not of fear, but of comprehension. "I saw you build your art business," he said. "You started with your hush money, as you call it. You incorporated. You negotiated your own studio lease, undercutting the listed price by 30%. You sourced your materials from 3 different international suppliers, creating a bidding war for your contract. You placed your pieces in 2 small galleries and 1 online consortium, and in 1 year, your small, one-woman operation turned a 40% profit." Eliza stared at him. "You know all this." "I know," Arthur said, "that you didn't just get a degree in art history from Wharton. You were a double major, business administration, Sloan School, with honors. A degree you buried because your parasitic husband told you it wasn't feminine." He finally turned to look at her fully. "I didn't disapprove of your marriage because you chose love. I disapproved because you chose to be less. You shrank to fit into his world." The gala. That was the first time in a decade I saw the daughter I raised, the one who, when pushed, pushes back. He pointed to the door. "Julian is a liability. He's a hole in a balance sheet. You are a sterling. Go in there and show them." Eliza took one deep breath, centered herself, and pushed open the heavy glass doors. She walked to the head of the table. The board members stared, their disapproval a tangible thing. "Good morning," Eliza said, her voice clear and steady. Mr. Abernathy, the lead director, a man with a face like a clenched fist, spoke first. "Ms. Sterling, this announcement is highly irregular. Your father has put this board and our shareholders in an untenable position. You have 0 corporate experience." "That's incorrect," Eliza said. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket and inserted it into the table's console. The massive screen at the end of the room lit up. "For the last year, I have been the CEO of ES Studios, LLC, a profitable, albeit small, international arts and logistics company. But you're right, Mr. Abernathy. That's not my relevant experience." She clicked a button. A new slide appeared. A financial analysis chart. "My relevant experience," she said, "is that I spent 10 years as the unpaid, unofficial strategist for your new media competitor, Vance Tech." The board stiffened. "While you were all dismissing Damien Vance as new money, I was the one who built his initial business plan. I was the one who identified his first 3 acquisition targets. And I am the only one in this room who knows exactly where his company is vulnerable." She clicked again. A complex web of shell corporations and offshore accounts filled the screen. "Mr. Vance," she continued, her voice like ice, "has a problem. His company is over-leveraged. He's been bleeding cash for 6 months, propping up a failing AI venture. He's desperate, so desperate, in fact, that he's resorted to unconventional funding." She zoomed in on one shell corporation, JS Capital, based in the Cayman Islands. "This entity," she said, "has funneled $200 million into Vance Tech in the last quarter. JS Capital, as I discovered last night, is 100% owned by my brother, Julian Sterling." The board gasped. Eleanor Davies swore under her breath. "It appears," Eliza said, "that Damien Vance hasn't just been a competitor. He's been blackmailing my brother, using his gambling debts as leverage, and forcing him to embezzle from the Sterling family trust to keep Vance Tech afloat." She had them. The room was hers. The artist had just exposed a multi-million-dollar fraud in under 5 minutes. "Damien Vance's company is a house of cards," Eliza said, "and the 2 contracts he has pending with Sterling Shipping, those aren't just contracts, they're his lifeline. Without them, he will default on his loans, and his company will implode within a week." Mr. Abernathy was pale. What are you proposing, Ms. Sterling?" Eliza smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in 24 hours. It was not a nice smile. "I am proposing," she said, "that we cancel those contracts, effective immediately. And then I'm proposing we use the $200 million he stole from us as a down payment. We're not going to let Vanstech implode. We're going to acquire it. We'll buy it for pennies on the dollar, absorb its assets, fire its corrupt CEO, and recoup every last cent my brother stole." Silence. Then Eleanor Davies, the formidable woman, began to clap, slowly, then steadily. Mr. Abernathy, stunned, joined her. One by one, the entire board was on its feet, applauding. Arthur Sterling, watching from the doorway, finally allowed himself a small, thin, and terrifyingly proud smile. The 36 hours following the gala were, for Damien Vance, a masterclass in psychological disintegration. The first 6 were spent in a state of pure, adrenaline-fueled rage. He had smashed a $50,000 crystal sculpture in his penthouse foyer, while Isabella, in a panic, had screamed at him. "What does this mean, Damien? What does this mean? That old man, he can't be serious. You told me she was nothing. You told me her family hated her." "Shut up," he had roared, his voice raw. "Just shut up, I'm thinking." But he wasn't thinking. He was panicking. The next 12 hours were spent in a blur of frantic phone calls. His first call at 7:01 a.m. was to Julian Sterling. It went straight to a disconnected message. He tried Julian's encrypted messenger, rad receipts, but no reply. The little rat was in the wind. His next 47 calls were to Eliza, each one a different shade of his unraveling psyche. The 9 a.m. calls were furious, demanding. "Eliza, call me, now. You have no idea what you're doing. You'll destroy that company. You need me." The 1 p.m. calls were condescending, manipulative. "Elle, darling, listen. I know you're just acting out. I know I hurt you, but this is too far. Let's have dinner. Just us. We can fix this." The 8 p.m. calls were desperate. "Eliza, please. Those Sterling shipping contracts. That's just business. You can't let your father do this. He'll ruin me. Don't let him ruin me. I'll apologize. I'll make Isabella apologize." The 3 a.m. calls, drunk and maudlin, were pathetic. "I miss you. I never stopped. It was always you, Elle. She's nothing. She's a child. Please, I made a mistake. Don't do this." They all went to her new, stone-walling executive assistant, a man with a voice like a polite guillotine, who simply replied, "Ms. Sterling is unavailable." The final 18 hours were the worst. The market had opened. News of Arthur's speech had hit the financial wires like a bomb. Sterling Air named in shock move. Eliza. Sterling, ex-wife of Vanstech's Damien Vance, tapped as sole successor. Then the second bomb dropped. Sterling Enterprises terminates 2 key logistics contracts with Vanstech, citing immediate strategic review. Vanstech stock, already teetering on a knife's edge, didn't just drop. It plummeted. It fell off a cliff. 40% of its value gone, wiped out before the lunch bell. His bankers, who had been so friendly last week, were now using words like collateral call and immediate default. He was ruined. He was finished. So when, at 9 a.m. on the second day, a formal, calendared invitation appeared in his inbox, he almost wept with relief. From Executive Office of the CEO, Sterling Enterprises subject, Vanstech General Sterling merger discussion. Time, 10 a.m. Sterling Tower, 80th floor boardroom. A merger. The relief was so profound, it instantly metastasized back into arrogance. Of course, she was going to save him. She still loved him. He had known it. This whole CEO thing was a front, a power play by her father to scare him. But Eliza, his Eliza, she was still in there. She was a painter, not a killer. She loved him too much to see him destroyed. She was bringing him in, offering him a lifeline, a partnership, a merger. He'd have to swallow his pride, maybe even give her a 60-40 split. But he would survive. He would live to fight another day. He put on his best suit, a cobalt blue Brioni designed to convey power and confidence. He kissed a high-strung, simpering Isabella goodbye, telling her, "Don't worry, baby, I'm going to handle this. We'll own this city by Christmas." He strode into the Sterling Tower, not as a supplicant, but as a partner. The 80th floor boardroom was designed to intimidate. It was a cavern of dark mahogany, smoked glass, and a single 50-foot table that looked like it had been carved from the heart of a mountain. The view of Central Park, far below, made the city look like a map you could simply fold up and put in your pocket. Eliza was already there, sitting at the absolute head of the table. She was not the woman from the gala. She was not the wife he had known. She wore a charcoal grey suit, severe and perfect. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to pull her eyes into a permanent, focused squint. She looked like a bird of prey. Her father, Arthur, sat at her right hand, not as the CEO but as the chairman. He was watching, silent. The entire board, the dozen angry owls from the day before, was present. They were arranged down both sides of the table, a tribunal of iron-grey suits and calculating eyes. They were not there to negotiate. They were there to watch a sentence be carried out. "Damien," Eliza said. Her voice was cold. It didn't echo. It just landed. "Thank you for coming." "Eliza," Damien said, spreading his arms wide, a performance of warmth and relief. He even started to walk toward her, as if for an embrace. "My God, Elle, what a crazy couple of days. This is a lot." A single uniformed security guard, standing by the door, took one subtle step forward. Damien stopped. "Please sit," Eliza said, gesturing not to the seat near her, but to the single, isolated chair at the very opposite end of the table. The defendant's chair. The confidence wavered, just a fraction. He was 50 feet away from her. He cleared his throat and sat, the performance snapping back into place. "Okay," he said, clasping his hands on the table. "A merger. I love it. I'm glad you see the potential. Your father, he's a lion, a true old-world lion. But this is the new world, Elle. You and me. Sterling's logistics and Vance Tech's, well, everything else. It's a perfect synergy. I've had my team draw up some potential valuations. Now, I know things are volatile, but I think a 60-40 split in your favor is more than generous. It shows my goodwill. It shows I still care." He smiled, his charming, billion-dollar smile. It had no effect. Eliza looked at him as if he were a specimen under glass. "There will be no merger, Damien," she cut him off. The smile froze. "What?" "There will be no partnership. There will be no 60-40 split. You are not here to negotiate. You are here to listen." She picked up a small remote, and the massive screen at the end of the room flickered to life. "Let's start with the contracts your team has been calling us about." A slide appeared. Contracts 881A, Sterling Pacific, and 904C, Sterling EU. Status: terminated. "You can't do that," Damien said, his voice rising. "Those are ironclad. I'll sue you. I'll sue this whole company for tortious interference." "Please do," Eliza said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Our legal team would be happy to enter discovery. They are especially interested in the $1.2 million in kickbacks you paid to our former VP of Logistics to expedite the deal. We have his sworn affidavit, or perhaps they'd rather discuss the shell company in Cyprus you used to pay him. We have those wire transfers too." Damien's mouth snapped shut. He looked winded. "But that," Eliza continued, "is just housekeeping, a simple breach of contract. We're here to discuss something more significant." She clicked the remote. A new slide appeared. It was a complex web of offshore accounts, all funneling into one name: JS Capital, Cayman Islands. I don't know what that is," Damien stammered, his face losing its color. That's privileged information. It's stolen information, Damien, and stolen money." "To the sum?" She clicked again, and a number appeared in bright, brutal red. 450,000, embezzled from the Sterling family trust by my brother, Julian. "That's a lie!" Damien half rose from his chair, his voice cracking. "Julian is an investor. He's my friend. He believed in my vision. It was a private loan." "A loan?" Eliza said. She looked to Eleanor Davies, the formidable board member, who was looking at a file in front of her. "Ms. Davies," Eliza said, "you're our lead auditor. Does this look like a loan?" "No, Ms. Sterling," Eleanor said, her voice cutting. "It looks like blackmail and embezzlement. The funds were withdrawn from the trust without authorization, using forged credentials in 5 separate tranches. Each withdrawal directly corresponds within 24 hours to a payment made from JS Capital to cover a margin call on Vanstech's institutional debt." Eliza looked back at Damien. "He believed in your vision so much that you had to threaten him to get the money?" "No, you can't prove that." "Can't I?" Eliza said. "Let's listen." She pressed a button on the console. A distorted, tinny voice filled the silent boardroom. It was Damien's. Audio clip. "I don't care how you get it, Julian. Sell a fucking yacht. Ask your father. Or don't. You know what? Don't ask him. Just find it. Because if my banker calls me one more time, I'm sending your father a little video link from Macau. I wonder if he knows his son's taste in entertainment. You have 48 hours." The audio clicked off. Damien Vance was ashen. He was visibly shaking. "And just in case that's not clear enough," Eliza said, "we also have the emails." The screen filled with them. Threats. Bank account numbers. More threats. "You're a joke, Julian. You're lucky I'm even talking to you. Now send the rest, or the post gets the photos. Your choice." "While you were buying Balmain dresses," Eliza whispered, the microphone picking up every venomous syllable. "While you were pouring champagne on people at galas, you were using stolen money, my family's money, to prop up your company, which is, at its core, as hollow as you are." Damien stared at her, his face a contortion of disbelief and pure, undiluted hatred. You... He was speechless. "So," Eliza said, "here is your one and only offer. It is not a negotiation. It is a choice." She stood up and walked, not quickly, but with a deliberate echoing pace, down the 50-foot length of the table until she was standing directly in front of him. He was forced to crane his neck to look up at her. "You have 2 options, Damien. Option A. You say no. You walk out of this room. And I will pick up this phone." She gestured to the console. "And I will call the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. I will hand him this entire file. The fraud, the wire transfers, the audio, the blackmail. You will be arrested before you reach the lobby. Vanstech will be seized by the SEC. Your personal assets, your penthouse, your cars, Isabella's, things will be frozen and liquidated in a bankruptcy court. You will go to federal prison for a very, very long time." She leaned in closer. And Julian, he'll go to prison too, as your co-conspirator. Damien's eyes widened in panic. Or, Eliza said, there is option B. She slid a thick, leather-bound document across the table. You will sign this. It's a full confession. It's also a transfer of assets. You will sign over your 51% controlling shares and all personal assets tied to the company to Sterling Enterprises, effective immediately. This will be valued at exactly $450,000. It will wipe out the debt you owe us. We will absorb Vance Tech, its patents, and its non-corrupt employees. We will restructure it. And me? Damien whispered, his voice hoarse. What happens to me? You, Eliza said, will get nothing. You will be unemployed. You will be scrubbed from the company you built on my ideas. You will walk out of here with nothing but the suit on your back and the watch on your wrist. You will be a nobody. Just... Damien, she paused. And in exchange for your full cooperation, Sterling Enterprises will not pursue criminal charges. The evidence of Julian's involvement will be buried. The debt will be considered paid. This was the master stroke. She wasn't just destroying him. She was cleaning her own house. She was protecting the Sterling name, even from itself. It was a move her father would have made. Damien stared at the document as if it were a snake. He looked up at her, his eyes begging. Eliza, Elle, you can't. Please, this is everything. This is my life. Your life, she asked. You bitch, he finally spat, the last of his facade crumbling. After everything I did for you, I made you. When I met you, you were a scared little girl, hiding in her father's shadow, painting your stupid, sad little pictures. I gave you a life. I put you on the red carpet. I made you Mrs. Damien Vance. The entire board winced. Arthur Sterling's face was granite. Eliza, however, did not flinch. She simply waited until he was done, his chest heaving. She looked at him, not with anger, but with a sudden, profound, and chilling clarity. No, Damien, she said, her voice soft. You didn't make me. You hid me. You found someone you knew was smarter than you, and you told her she wasn't. You told her to go paint. You told her she wasn't feminine enough. You told her to shrink so you could feel big. She leaned down, her face inches from his. You told me, in front of the entire world, that I was in over my head, that I didn't belong. She smiled, the cold, sharp smile that he would see in his nightmares for the rest of his life. You were right about one thing. I don't belong to you. I was never meant to be your wife. I was meant to be this. You just weren't smart enough to see it. She stood up to her full height. You have 60 seconds to sign, or I make the call. Damien looked at the pen. He looked at the guards. He looked at Arthur, who was watching him with a look of utter, bored contempt. He looked back at Eliza. He saw no mercy. He saw no love. He saw no Eliza. He saw a Sterling. His hand, shaking so badly he could barely hold it, grabbed the pen and signed his name. He signed away his company, his life, his name. Good, Eliza said, taking the document. Now get out. Eliza, please, he whispered, one last, pathetic attempt. Miss Sterling, she corrected him. Gentlemen, she nodded to the security guards. Mr. Vance is trespassing. The guards took his arms firmly, and as they pulled him from the chair, he finally, completely, snapped. You can't! You're nothing! He screamed, his voice echoing through the opulent room. You're just a spoiled, stained, empty... The heavy mahogany doors slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The boardroom was utterly silent for a full 10 seconds. Then Eleanor Davies said, Well, that was efficient. Eliza took a deep, shuddering breath. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, hard resolve in its place. She walked, not to her chair, but to the massive, floor-to-ceiling window, looking down on the city that was now, unequivocally, hers. She felt a presence behind her. It was Arthur. He stood beside her, not speaking, just watching the flow of traffic, the veins of the city. "You protected Julian," he said. It wasn't a question. "He's a fool," Eliza said, not looking away from the window. "But he's family. The $200 million is a loss, but the acquisition of Vance Tech's patent portfolio will more than cover it in 2 quarters. We didn't lose anything. We just transferred an asset." Arthur Sterling looked at his daughter. He saw the artist, and he saw the shark, and he finally understood that they were the same. He put a hand on her shoulder. It wasn't the detached gesture from the gala. It was firm. It was an anointing. "Well done, Ms. Sterling," he said. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she replied. He squeezed her shoulder once. "Welcome home, Eliza." She looked at her reflection in the glass. The woman looking back was not a wife. She was not a victim. She wasn't even just a daughter. She was the heir. And she was just getting started. And just like that, Eliza Sterling didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed her entire identity. She went from being a ghost at the gala to the most powerful woman in the city, all because she refused to stay broken. Damien and Isabella? They became the footnote. He was last seen trying to launch a cryptocurrency from a rented office in Delaware. This story shows us that the ultimate comeback isn't just about winning. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. The world will try to stain you, to tell you that you don't belong. Let them. Hold your head high, wear that stain like a badge of honor, and wait for your moment. Because power doesn't always go to the loudest person in the room. It goes to the most resilient. What did you think of Eliza's power move? Let me know in the comments below. If you loved this story of revenge and redemption, do me a favor and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe for more real-life drama every week.